Yes, I did it.
I exposed him. There's a kind of silence that only happens after everyone else has left the office. Not the regular after-hours hush, but a deeper one where even the hum of electronics feels like it's trying to stay quiet. That's the kind of silence she was used to. That was the soundtrack of her life for the last 5 years. Ava sat at her desk, still in her blazer, hair in a loose knot that had started tidy at 8 a.m. but now hung like an afterthought. Her monitor glowed in the dim room, casting cold light over her face. The cursor blinked inside a PowerPoint presentation titled Q3 Strategic Vision. The file said it was authored by Daniel Worthington, but every chart, insight, and slide layout had her fingerprints all over it. She had stayed late again not because she was asked to, but because no one else would do it right. And if it wasn't done right, he would say she had failed. Quietly, subtly. The kind of failure that doesn't show up in metrics, but in looks during meetings and decisions made without explanation. On the small table beside her desk sat a slice of carrot cake. Her birthday cake. The team had forgotten. Not just forgotten to celebrate, it never came up. No one mentioned it. No card. No text. Only one person knew, and when she'd mentioned it, almost as a joke, he laughed and said, "You still celebrate those?" It wasn't the words that stuck with her, it was the tone. That offhand, smiling mockery. Like caring about small joys was embarrassing. Like the fact that she had wanted to be acknowledged made her immature. She'd gone home that night and told herself she was too sensitive. But the truth was, it hurt. It wasn't about the cake. It was about being erased, again, by someone who depended on her more than he'd ever admit. "You care too much." That's what Daniel had said last week when she proposed including the junior analysts in the next team photo. Not promoting them, just acknowledging them. But he waved it off, said it would dilute the leadership image. Then, with that same smirk, added, "You're sweet, Ava. But this is business." He always said things like that. Like kindness was a flaw, like empathy was some naive indulgence she should have outgrown. But what cut deepest was how he made her feel ridiculous for caring. She used to believe work was like family. That if you showed up for people, held them up when things went sideways, and gave everything your best, eventually, someone would return the favor. But 5 years in, she couldn't remember the last time anyone had stayed late to help her. They just knew she would be there. Ava would fix it. Ava would smooth it over. Ava would catch the pieces before they hit the ground. And he knew it. Daniel Worthington, Senior Vice President of Strategy, thought leader, keynote speaker, LinkedIn darling. He had a gift. He could take anything good and make it his. Charm turned theft into collaboration. She had watched it happen 100 times. Her phrasing, her structure, her stories. And when people praised him, she'd smile. Because it felt petty to correct them. The worst part wasn't even that he stole credit. It was how deliberately he erased her in the process. There had been a moment last quarter, she remembered it clearly, when a senior client complimented the presentation style. Said the flow of ideas was rare, empathetic, but strategic. Ava had smiled reflexively. Then Daniel spoke over her, laughing, saying, "We try to keep it sharp, but human." It's a talent I've cultivated here. A talent he had cultivated. And just like that, the compliment turned into his trophy. She didn't even know what made her more tired, the theft, or how automatic it had become. There was the time she had rewritten a failing pitch deck in 48 hours on no sleep, while sick, and he opened the call by thanking the team for their dedication. When she coughed during the presentation, he muted her mic without asking. The time she had trained a new manager over 6 months, patiently walking her through every policy and tool, only for Daniel to introduce the woman later as his protégé. The time she stayed on the phone with a panicked client for 2 hours, talking them down from canceling their contract, and Daniel had sent her a single text, handled well. "Next time, loop me in sooner." Each of these things individually were small, but together they made a pattern. A maze she couldn't escape. where every effort vanished into someone else's spotlight and every misstep had her name etched in glass. She opened her personal email. The drafts folder was full of half-written resumes. She kept thinking if she just held on a little longer, if she just delivered one more perfect quarter, someone would finally say, "We see you." No one ever did. Her phone buzzed. A new email. From Daniel. Subject: Need final version by 8 a.m. Thanks. No greeting. No signature. Just a command, like she was a task instead of a person. Something inside her moved, just slightly. Not anger. Not yet. But something old and buried, tiredness shaped like clarity. Ava leaned back in her chair. Outside the office windows, the city shimmered under night fog. She thought of the last time she felt proud of something she'd made. Really proud. College, maybe? Or her first campaign, the one that actually got her hired. Back then, she used to keep screenshots of her slides, hang clippings of small wins above her desk. Now, all her victories had someone else's name on them. She reopened the deck and scrolled through the slides. Slide 14. Adaptive Solutions for Scalable Growth. Her phrase. Direct quote from a research note she'd written 3 weeks ago. He hadn't even changed the wording. Just dropped it in. She opened another window. Her personal Google Drive. She found the original research file and compared the two. Word for word. She didn't sigh. She didn't cry. It was too late for that. Instead, she clicked New Folder and named it Receipts. She began collecting. Carefully, quietly. Downloaded versions of every slide deck she'd authored, emails confirming her ideas, chat logs, timestamps. She wasn't sure what she was doing yet, only that she was doing it. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. Just to remember that she was real. That she had done something. That the silence wasn't proof she hadn't existed. Time passed. The office lights flickered off automatically, leaving her in shadow, lit only by her screen. She thought about that team dinner last fall. The one where Daniel gave a toast and thanked everyone by name except her. She had organized it, booked the venue, even paid for the drinks out of pocket to save the budget. And when someone asked if she was coming to the after party, he had smiled and said, "She's probably got spreadsheets to marry." Everyone had laughed. Ava saved the last file and leaned back. Her neck ached. Her eyes burned. There was one more thing she needed to do. She opened a blank document. Not a resignation. Not yet. Something else. She titled it, Q3 Contributions, Internal Notes. In clear, calm language, she wrote down her role in every major project from the last 18 months. She listed the names of interns and junior analysts who had gone uncredited. She added quotes from emails. She didn't embellish. She didn't accuse. She simply documented. When she finished, she added one line at the bottom. "Please direct all questions to the actual authors of this work." She exported it as a PDF. Then, she opened a new email window, addressed to her personal inbox, and attached the file. Then she closed everything. No grand gesture. No forwarded email to HR. Not yet. But the air around her felt different. Lighter. Ava stood and walked to the window. The city was still glowing. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. She felt quiet. Not the silence of being ignored. The silence of choosing not to speak for now. She turned off the lights. Walked down the hallway. Left her badge on the security desk. And stepped out into the cool, waiting night. It didn't hit her on the train ride home. Not even when the city lights flickered past the fogged-up window or when she walked the 7 blocks from the station, heels clicking against the wet pavement, coat flapping in the early wind. It wasn't until she opened the door to her apartment that something inside her finally shifted. The hallway smelled like old paint and dryer sheets. The quiet buzz of a neighbor's television bled faintly through the walls. She stepped inside, locked the door behind her, and dropped her bag. The living room was dim. She hadn't left a light on. That was when the weight arrived, not as a dramatic crash, but as something quieter, denser, like air thickening around her. Not grief, not anger, just the slow realization that she had poured years of her life into someone who never really saw her. Not really. She set her keys on the counter, took off her shoes, stood there for a moment, coat still on, trying to remember if she had eaten anything all day. There was an unopened bottle of sparkling water in the fridge. She took it out, cracked it open, and leaned against the kitchen counter. She didn't feel triumphant about the files she had gathered. She didn't feel vindicated. She just felt still. And in that stillness, memories began to surface. It started young, didn't it? The art projects in second grade. Her brother's messy watercolor sky had hung in the living room for years. Hers, detailed and deliberate, with a sun that had texture and birds that actually looked like birds, had been left in her backpack until it wrinkled. They said they just forgot, that they were too busy. But they never forgot his things. She'd been the quiet child, the good one, the helper, the one who didn't make trouble. She cleaned up, said thank you, made space. And people took that space from her as if it belonged to them. Her parents called her mature for her age, but what they meant was, you don't need attention. You don't ask for it, so we don't have to give it. When her brother missed curfew, the house turned upside down. When she stayed up until 3 a.m. studying, no one noticed. He got grounded for lying. She got silence for succeeding. It wasn't cruelty. That was the problem. It was comfort. They were comfortable letting her disappear. The pattern followed her. In high school group projects, she did the research, the formatting, the speaking. The others smiled, nodded, and let her. When the grades came back, they said, "We did great." At her first job, her manager once asked her to rewrite an entire policy proposal over a weekend. She did it. They implemented it. He got a promotion 2 months later. She didn't even resent him at the time. She'd told herself it was just the way things worked. That good work speaks for itself. But it doesn't. Not when someone else is holding the microphone. Back in her apartment, Ava took a slow sip of water and glanced around. Her walls were bare except for one small photo on the shelf, her and 2 interns from 3 years ago. They had surprised her with cupcakes after a grueling campaign. The candles were misshapen, the frosting uneven. They said she'd been the first manager who treated them like they mattered. She still kept in touch with one of them, Mia. Every now and then, Mia would text her updates from grad school, learned about stakeholder power mapping today. Immediately thought of you. It was never dramatic. Just real. And rare. Ava stared at the picture for a long time. Then she went to the bookshelf and took down an old leather-bound notebook. She had used it when she first started at the company, back when she still believed the effort would be noticed. Inside were meeting notes, sketches of presentations, random quotes from podcasts. On one page, she'd scribbled something she heard once. Some people build empires from shadows, just to remind the light who made them. She ran her fingers over the page. The thing that made it all worse, what twisted the knife, was that Daniel did see her. Just not in the way she needed. He saw her as a resource. Reliable. Predictable. Efficient. She was the fix. The uncredited editor. The one who cleaned the mess before the investors noticed. She was his safety net, and he knew she would never demand recognition. That was part of the contract, unspoken but rigid. If she had ever asked for more credit, more visibility, even just more respect, he would have made her feel like she was asking too much. That was Daniel's true skill. Not stealing credit, not leading, but making people question whether they had the right to feel what they felt. She remembered one day in particular. A client meeting had gone sideways. Miscommunication, messy data, the works. She had worked the entire night fixing the report, rewriting the summary, even talking the client off a metaphorical ledge. The next morning, Daniel walked into the office with coffee for himself, smiled, and said, "Thanks for catching that. Lucky you're detail-oriented." Then he went into a meeting with the execs and presented her strategy like it had arrived fully formed in his own mind. Afterward, someone from HR passed by her desk and said, "Daniel's really impressive under pressure, isn't he?" She had smiled. Again. But that night, she had gone home and deleted the thank you card she'd planned to leave on his desk. She realized she had been playing the wrong game. And she didn't even know the rules. It was all so subtle. That's what made it so difficult to explain, to friends, to mentors, to herself. There were no screaming matches, no dramatic breakdowns, just a slow siphoning of value. It was in the way people assumed he was the strategist and she was the assistant. The way emails that started with "Hi team" only ever addressed him. The way her feedback was framed as good instincts and his as vision. She used to tell herself it wasn't personal, that it was just office dynamics, hierarchy, that everyone dealt with this to some degree. But deep down, she knew it was personal. It was the way he looked at her when she offered an idea like he already knew he'd be using it. Just not with her name attached. She sat down on her couch and opened her laptop again. The folder she created at work, Receipts, was mirrored here on her personal drive now. She opened it and reviewed the files. There was nothing illegal, nothing inflammatory, just quiet proof. Slide versions with metadata, email chains confirming her drafts, voice memos, internal chat logs. There were no accusations, no rants, just evidence. A breadcrumb trail for anyone who cared enough to follow it. And for the first time, she was the one choosing which trail to leave behind. What would happen when it came out? She didn't know. She wasn't planning some big scandal. There would be no dramatic showdown, no confrontation in a boardroom. She wasn't trying to destroy him. She was just done helping him build a throne out of her spine. Let the truth walk quietly into the room. Let it speak in footnotes and file names and revised timestamps. Let it live in inboxes and watercolor whispers. She didn't need it to roar. She just needed it to exist. Ava closed the laptop and looked at the clock. 11:03 p.m. She stood, walked to the kitchen again, and opened a cabinet. There was an unopened jar of honey she had bought months ago, fancy, imported, something she never used. She opened it now, dipped a spoon in, and tasted it. It was the first sweet thing she'd allowed herself in weeks. There was no music. No one else in the apartment. Just her breath, the hum of the refrigerator, and the quiet warmth growing at the edges of her chest. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was something like remembering her own name. There was no announcement. No memo. No final message in the group chat. Ava simply stopped. It started on a Wednesday. Not because she had planned it that way, but because something inside her finally tipped. She walked into the office, as she always had, early, calm, prepared, but this time, something was different. There was no sense of urgency humming beneath her skin. No compulsion to perform. No need to prove anything. Her body moved through the same routines, log in, check inbox, skim through meeting notes, but her heart wasn't racing to anticipate who needed saving. She read every message slowly. Then, she let some of them go unanswered. The first thing she did was remove the automated calendar reminders she had created, not for herself, but for others. Daniel had relied on them for years. Subtle, well-timed nudges she had placed in his schedule to keep everything on track. Submit projections for Q4. Touch base with legal compliance review. Prep talking points for executive check-in. She deleted all of them. Quietly. Without a trace. Later that day, he messaged her on chat. "Daniel, hey, was there a note about the vendor call? I think I missed something." "Ava, I believe it was on your calendar." "Daniel, weird, didn't see it. Can you resend?" "Ava, I no longer manage your calendar." She watched the typing indicator blink, then vanish. For the first time in years, she felt still. Not passive. Not numb. Just present. As though something heavy had finally been lifted, not from her back, but from her need to keep carrying everything. She began drawing lines in quiet, deliberate ways. When Daniel dropped by her desk to ask for a quick polish on a document, one she hadn't worked on, hadn't even seen, she looked up and said, gently, "That's outside my scope." He blinked. Confused. Smiled awkwardly. Probably thought she was joking. But she didn't offer to help. She didn't soften it with her usual, "I can take a quick look if you're stuck." She let the silence explain what she wouldn't anymore. Outside the windows, the season had begun to shift. The leaves were curling inwards. Morning light arrived slower each day. There was rain that week, a soft, constant drizzle that never fully stopped. Ava liked walking through it. No umbrella. Just the quiet rhythm of drops on her coat, the mist on her cheeks. It felt like the world was rinsing itself. She removed herself from the newsletter distribution lists she had maintained. They weren't in her job description, she'd just started doing them because no one else would. She took down the pinned post in the team chat with key links and templates. Let someone else remember where things lived. She stopped staying late. That first evening, when the clock hit 6, she packed her bag and left, while others were still mid-sentence, mid-slide, mid-crisis. No explanation. No apology. She simply walked out into the rain. And with each step, she realized she wasn't just leaving the building. She was stepping away from a version of herself that had clung so tightly to usefulness, she had forgotten how to be seen. At home, she unplugged her work phone. Just for an hour at first, then longer. By the weekend, she left it powered down on purpose. No one called. No one checked in. That was the final confirmation, wasn't it? When you remove yourself and the silence that follows is complete. The next Monday, she wore a different expression. Not armor, she wasn't hard. Just still. Present. Her gaze no longer scanned the room for fires to extinguish. Daniel came by her desk, holding his coffee cup like it was part of his personality. He asked about the stakeholder report. "I think we missed an angle," he said, like he was inviting her into a game they used to play. She looked at him for a moment, then replied, "I delivered what was asked. If you'd like revisions, you can submit a request." Again, that pause. That attempt at casual charm. "Since when are we formal?" he asked, half laughing. She met his eyes. Calm. "Since I stopped volunteering." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't push back. But the message was clear. She was no longer a shadow in his campaign. No longer the hidden scaffolding beneath his stage. And something about that unsettled him. The next day, he CC'd her on a reply-all thread. One that praised a project she had led but now named another colleague as the key contributor. She didn't respond. Didn't correct him. She forwarded the message, along with her original drafts, notes, and time logs to her personal drive. Not out of spite. Not even as preparation. Just preservation. A private record of her reality. People in the office began to notice. Not loudly, not publicly, but in passing comments. A shift in energy. A sense that the quiet one who always knew the answer, always stepped in, was holding back. A junior analyst stopped her in the hallway. "Hey, are you okay? You just seem different." Ava smiled. "I'm fine. I just stopped offering what no one valued." The woman didn't reply right away. But later that afternoon, Ava found a sticky note left on her keyboard. "Thank you for showing us that it's okay to stop giving everything." There was one final act in her quiet undoing. Friday. Late afternoon. A request came through, urgent, naturally. A client was expecting a revised deck by Monday morning. Daniel asked if she could work your usual magic over the weekend. She typed her reply. Reread it once. Then hit send. "I'm unavailable this weekend. Please forward it to the assigned team." There was no anger in her response. No sarcasm. Just a sentence shaped like a closed door. She didn't offer an alternative, didn't apologize for her absence. And for once, she didn't feel the need to prove she had something better to do. Her time didn't need to be justified to be sacred. That night, she took a walk. It was nearly dark, the city streets wet and shining under streetlights. The rain had returned, fine and cold, brushing against her skin like a reminder. She breathed it in, letting it settle into her bones. She had always imagined that stepping back would feel like betrayal, that refusing to help would make her feel guilty or weak or selfish. But all she felt was space. Inside her chest, in her thoughts, in the quiet stretch of sidewalk ahead. No one needed her. And for the first time, that didn't feel like rejection. It felt like peace. Later, she sat by the window with tea and watched the water trace slow paths down the glass. Her inbox remained unopened, her notifications silent. She thought of everything she had given, the hours, the care, the revisions, the grace. And she thought of how easily it had been consumed, absorbed into someone else's success. But none of it had been wasted, because it had shaped her. And now that same devotion, the ability to notice details, to think 3 steps ahead, to lead without fanfare, was returning home. Not to serve others, but to rebuild herself. She didn't plan revenge like people imagined it. There were no spreadsheets with names and red circles. No dramatic exposé. Just truth. Documented. Preserved. Ready. If the time came. She sipped her tea and closed her eyes. Somewhere behind her, in a folder hidden away, was everything she needed to reveal what had happened. What had always happened. But not tonight. Tonight, she was not plotting. She was resting. Because even quiet wars require strength. And she had finally stopped bleeding just to keep someone else's kingdom alive. The fallout didn't come as an explosion. It arrived like water through cracked stone. Quiet. Relentless. Irreversible. At first, they didn't even realize what was missing. That's the irony of systems built on invisible labor. They only notice the silence when it starts costing them. By Monday morning, the gears had started to slip. Not dramatically. Just a little slower. A little more jagged. Ava arrived at her usual time, coat damp from the drizzle outside. She made her tea, logged in, and waited. Not out of spite, but because the rhythm had changed. And she was no longer the one keeping time. It took less than an hour for the first signs to show. A calendar conflict caused 2 executive meetings to overlap. A client document hadn't been versioned properly and went out with incomplete data. A feedback summary, normally polished and neatly organized, was unreadable, a mess of bullet points with no narrative thread. She watched it unfold quietly. She said nothing. Her desk, once a quiet command center, now felt like an empty harbor. No one asked her to step in. Not yet. But eyes lingered longer as people passed. A hesitation at her door. A glance during calls. They knew something was off. They just couldn't name it yet. Daniel was the first to feel it directly. He walked past her desk mid-morning, brows drawn together, coffee in hand. Hey, Ava. That client deck, did we ever confirm the Q4 metrics with ops? She looked up, steady. I wasn't looped into that thread. But you usually check. Not anymore. His smile flickered. Just slightly. She watched the realization cross his face. Not just that something had changed, but that he didn't know what to do without her. It would have been satisfying once. But now it just felt distant. Like watching someone discover winter for the first time, surprised that breath leaves fog in the air. By midweek, the murmurs had begun. Ava heard them in fragments. Passing conversations, cautious tones. A team lead asking where the resource folder had gone. A senior manager questioning why engagement metrics hadn't been tracked this month. And then, at the edge of one meeting, someone whispered, "Wasn't that something Ava used to handle?" Yes, it was. She used to handle everything. But now, the cost of that had become visible in her absence. Thursday brought the first confrontation. Daniel scheduled a one-on-one. He was 5 minutes late. She greeted him politely, offered no pretense of warmth, but no hostility either. Just calm, professional. He sat, crossed his arms, and leaned forward. Listen, I know things have been tense lately. She waited. I don't know what's going on, but I'd like us to get back on track. You've always been, the glue. You're the heart of this team. The heart, not the voice, not the mind. Just the thing that kept everything else alive, quietly, invisibly. She smiled, just barely. I appreciate that. But I've stepped back from responsibilities that weren't mine. He blinked, caught off guard. But you've always gone above and beyond. She nodded. Once. That's true. And I'm done doing that. Silence. He shifted in his seat. Is this about recognition? Because we can make adjustments. I can speak to. It's not about titles. Or credit. Her voice stayed even. It's about value. About not having to earn respect by bleeding quietly in the background. He looked at her, trying to assess the terrain. But there was nothing to grip. No emotion to manipulate. No guilt to pull. Only her clarity. After the meeting, she returned to her desk and resumed her work. She didn't document the conversation. Didn't prepare a report. She didn't need to. She wasn't afraid anymore. By Friday, the team felt the weight. Without her quiet rebalancing, miscommunications turned into delays. Last-minute fixes didn't appear. Client responses came slower, messier. Interns asked questions no one else knew how to answer. People began to notice that leadership wasn't the same as presence. Daniel was visible, loud, confident. But when something cracked, he didn't know how to hold the pieces. She received a message from a former analyst she had mentored, one now at a new firm. Just saw a job listing for your department. Everything okay? Ava replied simply. Things are recalibrating. That weekend, Daniel sent a message. Not through the company channel, but to her personal number. A number she hadn't given him directly. We're all feeling your absence. Hope you're doing all right. Would love to chat, just the two of us. No pressure. She stared at the message for a long time. It was almost kind. Almost human. But that was Daniel's way. He didn't threaten. He didn't command. He persuaded. Disguised discomfort as concern. Made his needs sound like favors. She didn't respond. The following Monday, HR reached out. They wanted to schedule a developmental check-in. Language wrapped in velvet. But she knew what it meant. The silence was no longer comfortable. Her absence was costing them something. In the meeting, the HR partner was soft-spoken. There's been some concern about recent shifts in your engagement. We just want to understand how best to support you. Support. Another carefully chosen word. Ava met her gaze. I'm doing exactly what's expected of me. Nothing more. Nothing less. Of course. And we appreciate your professionalism. But we've noticed some gaps in certain processes that you've historically helped maintain. Yes, Ava said. And now those responsibilities can be redistributed. Properly. There was a pause. A flicker of something passed through the woman's expression. Unease, maybe. Or recognition. Would you be open to redefining your role more formally? Ava smiled. I think clarity would benefit everyone. They called it a realignment. A reallocation of support structures. But behind the polite language, the message was simple. The system is struggling without its skeleton. And the skeleton has stopped bending. At lunch that day, a younger colleague sat beside her in the break room. Is it weird that watching you say no makes me feel safer? Ava looked at her. Not surprised. Not flattered. Just grateful. It's not weird. It means you're starting to see the cost. I think I always saw it, the woman said. I just thought it was the price of being good. Ava stirred her tea. It's not. It's the price of being used. The week closed quietly. No applause. No final word. Just shifting tides. Daniel no longer copied her on every message. Teams started assigning tasks more carefully. Deadlines grew more realistic. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even fair. But it was changing. And she had done it without rage, without threats, without breaking anything. All she did was step back. And the space she left behind said everything they had refused to hear. The last message didn't come from him. It wasn't a meeting request. Not a call from HR. Not a team check-in. It came in the form of a quiet letter, handwritten on soft paper, tucked inside an envelope with no return address. She found it on her desk one Monday morning, waiting among the usual reports and folders. No one claimed responsibility. No one watched her open it. Inside was a single sheet. No greeting. Just the words, written in fine, slightly uneven handwriting. You were the first person who saw me. I didn't know what that meant until I left. I use everything you taught me every day. Thank you. I hope you finally left the fire you kept putting out. It wasn't signed. But she knew who it was. Mia, the intern from 3 years ago. The one who used to shadow her quietly, scribbling notes with care, eyes wide with a mix of awe and uncertainty. The one who once stayed after a presentation and whispered, "How do you stay so calm when no one listens?" Ava had smiled at the time and said, "You don't stay calm. You just get used to it." Now she wasn't calm. She was clear. She placed the letter inside her notebook. The one she hadn't opened since her first days in that job, the one filled with quotes, sketches, thoughts she never shared. The pages were different now. The handwriting steadier. The voice stronger. She hadn't just survived the fire. She had learned to stop walking into it. Outside, winter was finally settling in. The rain had turned to soft snow, powdering the windowsills and making the streetlights glow a little warmer against the dusk. People rushed to trains and rideshares. Coffee steamed in gloved hands. And through the large office windows, the world looked blurred and hushed, like it, too, was remembering how to breathe. Ava stood and walked to the glass. She stared at the street below, watching the snow gather. There was something about snow that always felt like silence made visible. Not cold, not distant, just clean. She had received 3 emails from Daniel that morning. The first had been professional. The second, reflective. The third, a little desperate. I miss the way we used to work together. I didn't realize how much I relied on you. I know things got off balance. Let's talk? Just you and me. Off the record. She didn't reply. Not because she was bitter, but because there was nothing left to say. Some truths are not for shared understanding. They're for walking away. That afternoon, she cleared her desk slowly. She didn't rush. She didn't pack it all at once. Just small, simple things: a mug she liked, a plant that had somehow survived 2 winters, a photo of her mother smiling from a time before things got complicated. She left behind the framed Employee Excellence certificate she'd received 3 years ago. The one Daniel had presented with a handshake and a photo op. She remembered how he had said, "We couldn't do this without her," and how the "we" never felt like it included her. She placed the certificate quietly in the recycling bin. At 4:43 p.m., she sent one last email. Subject: Transition Notice. As of Friday, I'll be stepping down from my role. I've ensured that all current responsibilities are documented and delegated accordingly. Thank you for the experience and for what it taught me directly and otherwise. No explanation. No bitterness. Just the truth. The replies came quickly. From people she didn't expect. From those who had watched her work but never spoken. From interns, assistants, even a few senior managers she'd once trained in silence. Most were short. Some were clumsy. But all shared a tone she recognized. Respect. Real, quiet respect. That evening, as the office thinned and the snow thickened, Daniel stopped by her desk. He didn't sit. He didn't smile. He looked at the empty shelves, the bare surfaces, the untouched chair, and then at her. You're really going. She met his eyes. Calm. Yes. He exhaled. Not dramatically. Just enough to fill the space between them. I didn't think you'd actually do it. Ava tilted her head, just slightly. That's the problem. No one ever thought I would leave. They just assumed I'd stay. He nodded once, swallowed words he couldn't shape, then said, softly, I didn't mean to take so much. A beat of silence. Then her reply, you didn't take. I gave. That's what I had to unlearn. He nodded again, not in agreement, in understanding. Then he left. She didn't watch him go. Later that night, she stood in her apartment, looking at the box of her things. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel sad. She felt still. She boiled water for tea, lit a small candle on the windowsill, and opened the window just enough to let the snow scent drift in. For the first time in years, no one needed her to fix something. And the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. There would be other jobs, other titles, other rooms where her name might carry more weight. But right now, she wasn't chasing validation. She was rediscovering presence. That warm, difficult space where your worth isn't borrowed, stretched, or repackaged. It just is. She took out the letter from Mia once more. Reread it slowly. I hope you finally left the fire you kept putting out. Ava smiled. She had. She wrote a reply she'd never send. I stayed in the fire because I thought that was where good people belonged. That helping was the price of being loved. But love doesn't burn you out. It builds something with you. Thank you for remembering who I was. I'm remembering, too. She folded it, tucked it into the notebook, and placed it on her bookshelf. The candle flickered gently beside her. The snow outside continued to fall, each flake a small silence. She was alone, but not lonely, and for the first time in a very long time, she was finally free.